Hi, welcome back. I want to show you a tip and a trick for when you're cutting dados and cross-cutting a dado into a board that may be too big to handle on the table saw. An alternative and an alternate way of doing this. So sometimes you might have something that's too long, not wide enough, and you don't feel comfortable pushing that through on the table saw because if that tilts, or maybe you don't have enough room to get the miter gauge on there to help support it. So let me show you an alternative for cutting dados and rabbets using the router rather than the table saw. Let's come over here and I'll show you how I'm going to make this jig. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a T-square using some scrap plywood. I'm going to line this up so that I can clamp this onto the board that I'm going to put the dado or rabbet in, and I'm going to screw this down and square this up so I have an edge guide for the router to follow, and it's going to help me locate the location of where to cut the dado faster and easier. And I think sometimes it's even cleaner than the table saw, because if you don't have a really nice dado blade, when you go across veneers, melamines, plywoods, you might get a lot of splintering, and the router should help reduce some of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to draw a line so I know where to put the glue so I don't go crazy and put too much glue on here. So I'm going to draw a line. That's going to represent where this board's going to be screwed on here. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on there. Don't have to go crazy. This is just to help hold it. I'm going to set this on here, and I'm going to put one screw in. So I'm going to use an impact gun, some self-tapping screws, and I'm going to try to flush this out with the bottom the best I can, and put one screw in. Make sure it's countersunk. These are self-tapping. And then you want to make sure this is square. So I'm going to put the square on here, line that up. If you can't see that, I'll put this side. And then put another screw in. So however you got to check that, if you got a longer framing square, do that. And then I'm going to put a second screw in. Make sure that it didn't move. Make sure that it's square. So that's nice and square. I'm going to put a couple more screws in because I brought them, just to make sure that doesn't move. And the screw's going to hold this while the glue's drying. So just to be safe. That's nice and flush. I am going to get a scrap piece of wood and do it as my sample cut in there. I'm just going to put some bench dogs in here so this doesn't move when I push this forward. And I'm going to put a clamp. I like to put the clamp right up on the edge, so if this is longer, that this doesn't have that ability to move. So I put this right up on the edge there. Put this here, and if this works, if this is the same thickness material. If it's not the same thickness material, pull this over off the bench and let this hang down below the bench so you don't find that you hit a bump here. So I'm using a 3/4 inch straight bit. It's actually a 3/4 undersize. It's for 3/4 inch plywood. And I just want to make sure I'm not going to hit that bench dog, which it looks like I might. So I'm going to move that out of the way. And I could clamp this. And maybe let me just clamp this to the bench, just so it doesn't move on me. It's always better to be safe than sorry. So I can't do that there. Set the apron of the bench there. Slide this out. Okay, so that looks safe. I'm gonna make sure I put on some glasses. Now, the direction you feed the router is important because if I try to pull this back this way, the direction the router bit's spinning, it's gonna try to pull the router over here. So it's important, get a pencil, draw a line, an arrow, which way to feed the router. So you wanna put the fence on the left-hand side and push away from you because the direction the router bit's going is gonna keep it up against that fence. So put on some glasses. And this is just a test piece. So here we go. So I was testing two things. I'm testing the depth of the router bit or how much wood's remaining after I cut the dado. I'm testing that to make sure that the plywood fits in there nice. So that's the plywood undersized bit and it should fit in there. It should fit in there nice and snug. So it's not too loose. If I use a 3/4 inch bit on the plywood, it's gonna be too loose. So once I sand the plywood a little bit, it should be okay. But now, this locates how far away the router bit is from the base of the router. So when I go to use this in a future piece, you're gonna see a big difference. How easy this is to line up. So now if you have different size router bits you're gonna use, if you're gonna use 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 3/4 undersized, I might have a different one for each router bit because this is gonna tell me exactly where that groove is. So you can see here, I drew lines where I wanna cut a dado. Now if I set this on here and line that up with those lines, that's gonna line that up perfect with that. If I didn't have this, I would have to measure the distance from the router bit to the cutter, and I'd have to make sure that my straight edge guide was square. This is gonna help eliminate all that. So I'm gonna put this on here. I'm gonna line this up. With that, I'm gonna clamp this to it so it doesn't slide. I'm just going to tap that to get that lined up. I'm going to just put a clamp on here again just so it doesn't move. Make sure that's tight. I'm a little bit off my line. I'm going to line that up better. Clamp that to the board. Make sure it's not going to move. I like using the D-handle router because I'm able to turn the router on and off and I don't have to take my hands up here and take my hands off it. So I set this on the edge. I'm going to let that stop. But that cut that right on my pencil line. The 1/4 inch or the 3/4 inch plywood's gonna fit in there nicely. And this is a simple, easy jig that you can make for your router, for the size router bit that you're gonna be using for your project. That should help.